Good afternoon, everyone. Please go ahead and come in, take your seats if you can find them. Good to see that we have such a great turnout today. Want to thank everybody for joining us, and especially want to thank the IMF for hosting us again this year. They're always such gracious and generous hosts, and we really appreciate them and their team opening their facilities to us. We have a really packed, star-studded lineup today, so I'm going to be really brief with my opening remarks before we kick off with the managing director. The theme that brings us together this year is the 80th anniversary of the Bretton Woods institutions of the IMF and the World Bank, which will be later this year. And this year really offers us a moment to assess the effectiveness of the institutions, what they're doing well, where they need to continue to develop, to really be fit for purpose to meet the challenges of the next 80 years. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. That's what we've talked about throughout the week at BWC's events. So it was really great to see many of you yesterday and this morning at some of our sideline events. And we also hope that you saw the report that we released yesterday that focused on this theme as well. And I want to thank the report authors, Joachim Levy, who we'll hear from later today. We'll talk a bit more about the report, Axel Weber and Siddharth Tiwari, who really provided a lot of thought leadership for this new report on multilateral reform, which we really think is going to be a substantive contribution to this ongoing dialogue about the reform of the institutions. So thank you very much, and we hope everyone gets a chance to read that. We're also going to be releasing some other new content this week, blog posts, podcasts. Thank you, Nancy Jacqueline, for all of your work on the podcast and all of the guests who have joined her, and also some op-eds. So be on the lookout for all of BWC's content throughout the week. And now, just briefly to introduce today's agenda. As I said, we have a really wonderful lineup. We're going to move quickly through the agenda without any breaks. So if you need to step out, please do so quietly to get refreshments or to use the bathroom. Please make sure your phones are on silent. And for each of the sessions, we're going to have very brief Q&A time at the end. So if you do have questions, we ask that you are brief and that you actually ask questions. And so just to give us a quick preview of the agenda, we're going to start with a series of fireside chats. We are very lucky to be joined by the principals of all three of the Bretton Woods institutions. So we're going to start with the managing director of the IMF, of this great institution. We'll move on to chat with the World Bank president, followed by the WTO director general. And then we'll be fortunate to hear from the Undersecretary for International Affairs, from the U.S. Treasury, and we'll conclude with a panel with some of BWC's thought leaders and focus a bit on some of what BWC's been working on in terms of multilateral reform, climate, and debt. So that will be the run of show today. I hope that you all enjoy the excellent lineup of speakers. And I think with that, we can go ahead and get started and hopefully welcome the Managing Director and BWC Vice-Chair John Lipsky to the stage.
Thank you. Let me add my welcome to, I'm sure Emily has already welcomed you all. And it's superfluous to welcome the managing director to her own house. But nonetheless, thank you for joining us. We're very appreciative that you're in this incredibly busy moment, you're taking the time to spend some time with us. But I'm very happy to start by offering a public congratulations on your renomination for a second term.
Thank you, John.
And I know there are lots of folks, as you can hear, very pleased by that. I hope many of you either listened to or read the managing director's curtain raiser speech for the meetings, because I thought they were particularly interesting and well taken. She said we have the alternatives of a turbulent 20s, a tepid 20s, or a transformational 20s, and that it's our choice about which it will be. Recent events have suggested that the odds of a turbulent 20s are higher. Today, of course, this morning, the World Economic Outlook was unveiled, and it suggested reasons for concern, I would say, in terms of the unevenness of the outlook. First, of course, was the U.S. data, in which the fund described, not only marked up growth prospects, but suggested, I believe the word was overheating. And Managing Director, perhaps you'd like to start by just a few broad words about the wheel.
Oh, well, I want to recognize the work of staff, especially Olivier Gourinch, in bringing to the spring meetings and to our membership a very thoughtful report in which what we focus on are the complicated news that data radiates. So what does data say? Data says growth is slightly better than we thought it would be. Inflation is going a bit faster than we thought it would be, but growth is weak by historic standards. And on inflation, we are in yo-yo land. It goes up, it goes down, meaning fasten your seatbelts. We haven't quite landed. And then when we look at the divergence in the world economy, again, complicated data. On the US, the data says it is an economy that is lifting up global growth by its sheer size and performance above expectations. But then what it means is that interest rates are likely to stay higher. The dollar is likely to stay higher. The flip side of it is for emerging market economies, their currencies would be depreciating and the cost of borrowing would be up, while the funds available may be moving to the United States rather than being available to emerging markets. So the complication then gets into the divergences within all the universes of countries. Emerging markets. You have the emerging markets that are actually benefiting from fragmentation because they're turning into connected countries. So goods, rather than going from China to the US, they go from China to Mexico, from Mexico to the US, extending the supply chain. Even more so, goods that were produced in one place are now produced in a different place by the same company at a higher cost. When we look at low-income countries, the more diversified economies are doing somewhat better. But even they are struggling with the good news on the US that translates into higher borrowing costs for them. Look at Côte d'Ivoire going to markets, Kenya going to markets, Benin going to markets, but at very high financing costs. So what is the conclusion we need to draw at the IMF? The first conclusion is that from a policy standpoint, there are some broad messages we can communicate, but then we need to drill down on a country-by-country basis because one size does not fit all. And in terms of how we approach the longer-term objectives, we have to scream from the top of a mountain, please pay attention to productivity and growth. And please move your economies in terms of reforms to improve your chances to do better in the years to come. Now, so here I am on the top of the mountain screaming. And of course, I'm very sympathetic to the membership because ministers of finance, central bank governors, yes, they want to think about the long term, but they are so preoccupied with the short term that I feel for them.
Yes. How can the fund be helpful in this regard?
Well, we can be helpful in three ways. The first is do the analysis thoroughly, objectively, and then communicate what you know well. And that is not a trivial task. This has never been a trivial task, and even more so today, when we have so many factors of uncertainty. Two, step up support for the countries that are in a very difficult spot. Those in the diverging category that without external financing will be in a precarious situation. And these are on the side of emerging markets, countries that have had systemic difficulties for quite some time, and on the low-income country side, primarily countries affected by conflict and violence. And three, bring attention to the long-term choices, how technology and economic policy can align to lift up productivity and growth prospects. I want to bring to your attention an article that was written by three colleagues led by Pierre-Olivier Gorincha on the transition to the green economy, to green energy. And the article says, we are in a world in which we have the technology to make this transition, but politics is walking the other way. So I see a huge role for the Bretton Woods institutions because of our universal membership to work hard to bring our members on the same page to make these choices that would define whether we are for a better future or we are for turbulence to continue. I'm asking everybody, when you read the World Economic Outlook, please concentrate on one graph that shows growth trajectory. What it tells us is that since the global financial crisis, medium-term growth prospects have gone down and down and down and down. If you are a skier, you would love it. It's like a Swiss ski slope. It is very troubling because what it tells us is that we may be in a world of populations being anxious and unhappy. May we please get out of that world?
Mm-hmm. Does this outlook, uncertain outlook, especially for some emerging economies, as you said, and low-income economies, does the fund have a financing role in this context?
Of course, we do have a financing role. It has been always there throughout the 80 years of the fund. And as we all know, who the fund is there for to finance has changed over time. We had countries that are advanced economies needing the fund to support them when they faced balance of payment problems. The most recent cases, of course, were the Eurozone countries. We had large emerging market economies in the past needing the fund. Brazil, India. Now, these economies that have built strong fundamentals and strong reserves, they don't need to come to the fund for financing. It doesn't mean that the need for financing has disappeared. So where are the countries where we have to concentrate financial support? In emerging markets, countries that have weaker fundamentals, high level of debt, significant problems to increase domestic resource mobilization and build reserves. When you look at our portfolio, you would see there Argentina, Egypt, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. But then you have a set of countries that are smartly using the fund for precautionary purposes. So they're saying, we're not going to build huge reserves. It is costly. We are going to go to the fund and have a precautionary credit line to buffer us against the more shock-prone world we live in. So you look at Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile. These countries are not in trouble, on the contrary, au contraire, as the French would say. They have strong fundamentals, but they have opted to rely on the collective reserve capacity that the fund offers to buffer themselves against risks. And then we have the low-income countries. And for them, it is paramount for us to be able to offer low-cost financing to help them deal with the tremendous difficulties they face. So when I look at our current lending portfolio, we have extended some $360 billion in lending, part to emerging markets that need financing, just about 1/3, part in precautionary lending, and then part to low-income countries. Now we also have a brand new instrument, the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. And the reason I'm saying brand new is because for an institution of 80 years of age, 2 years is nothing. We have created this 2 years ago. By today, we have 18 programs. 11 of them are where? In Africa. Why? Because when you look at climate shocks, unfortunately, the African continent has done nothing to create the climate problem, but is most severely impacted. So my key point here is that we move our financial support over time to face the needs of the membership as of the period we are in. And I obviously would be happiest if the financial role of the IMF is primarily in precautionary terms, not so much in financing, but we do what the world, what the membership requires from us.
Of course, and precautionary are the facilities that provide crisis prevention, whereas
Yes.
as opposed to crisis resolution, which has been more traditional for the fund.
And this is where we are. We are in a more shock-prone world. We are being hit unexpectedly from pandemic, from climate, from conflict, and that is how it is going to be. So building more the precautionary muscle of the fund in analysis and in precautionary financing is the way to go. I just want to tell you a small story. So we are in Marrakesh, October 6th. And I'm thinking, God, may 2023 be a calmer year. And you know what happened on October 7th? Hamas attacking Israel and then the consequences from it. This weekend, I'm with our communications team We are preparing. I went to Face the Nation on Sunday, and we are looking into what may be on the horizon of questions. And sure enough, we have the Iran missile attack on Israel. When you look forward with more uncertainty, what is the best we can do? Really help countries build more resilience, stronger fundamentals, but also more agility so we can quickly adjust to a changing world.
Yes, and I think that implies precautionary facilities.
That implies precautionary facilities. So here is a piece of great news. We did reform our precautionary facilities to make them more agile and more useful for the membership.
Yes.
And I think that is going to pay off exactly for the reason, John, you're stressing.
Yes, let's hope. Are you satisfied with the latest moves with regard to fund resources, the increase in the regular account, the reserve account, and or the increase in quotas, an easy way to say it, plus are you happy with the progress in getting SDRs and donations to the trusts?
Yes, yes, and yes, but I'm very happy with the wisdom of the membership to increase by 50% our quota resources during the Marrakesh meeting. Why? Because we now can genuinely say the fund is a quota-based institution with predictable resources. Before this decision, the share of quotas in our $1 trillion lending capacity dropped to around 40%. I was telling the members, how can I, with straight face, say we are a quota-based institution? This has now changed. We have returned the primacy of quotas, and we certainly need it for that precautionary role of the fund. We have, during Marrakesh, and that got to be known as the Marrakesh miracle, we managed to massively increase the contributors to the lending capacity and the subsidy account of our Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust.
Yeah.
And when I say massively, from 17 countries to 41. And among these 41, not very rich countries, not very big countries. Mauritius is one of the contributors. Why is this important? Because these are the countries in the toughest spot in today's world economy. Low-income countries under that distress in particular, they see the debt payments virtually cannibalizing their capacity to invest in education, in health, in infrastructure, and having the fund to be there for them reliably is very, very important. On the RST, so we set the target 42 billion. And actually, on the PRGT, I also want to thank the US for a $21 billion loan, which is so precious when we want to have that strength for these countries. On the RST side, our target was $42 billion. We raised $42 billion. But the demand, and that I'm going in the buts now, the demand for PRGT is enormous. For RST is enormous. Why? Because countries are genuinely struggling to create fiscal space for the green transition, for climate adaptation, and they are keen to see the fund helping them on the policy front. So we have 18 countries, 18 programs, and 30 countries in the queue. Now I'm going to the but. We have to genuinely work hard to raise our capacity for a world of more frequent shocks. And that means that for the members that are in a position to provide more support through the fund directly, or to provide support through swap lines in their central banks, through other forms of strengthening the global financial safety net, we have to do it. We have an unfinished business in terms of voice and representation of emerging markets and developing economies. Their share in the world economy has gone up, but their quota share are the same. This is a problem for the membership, and the membership need to think about it. For us as management, we have to pursue other ways for voice and representation. Is our staff representing the world? Is the senior management of the fund representing the world? Are we listening to all countries and treating them fairly, rich and poor, big and small? And that is where I see work for us, responsibility for us. And finally, we have to work with the membership to recognize that balance of payment problems in 2024 are different from balance of payment problems in 1945, 1946. We have to think of the role of the fund as a source of strength and stability in the world economy in the context of what are the wins today and how we can buffer them.
This, your description of what's happening suggests that we're likely to see continued debt pressures, especially on many developing low-income countries. How is work going on improving the debt restructuring mechanism that I know you've put in effort along with your World Bank colleague?
I want to start from what we have done at the fund. We just adopted some policy upgrades of our approach to supporting that restructuring, and I want to thank the membership for that. We are using the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable very actively to identify and eliminate obstacles to faster and more efficient debt resolution. And that means addressing issues like predictability and timeline, including within the common framework, comparability of treatment. These are obstacles for faster, more efficient debt resolution that can only be removed by the creditors, public and private, new and traditional, coming together. Our role is to provide this space for resolution that ultimately would translate in faster action. I wish we would move much faster. But history tells us that when you have very different interests, you have to have a bit of patience to get people to see eye to eye.
But
I'm not a very patient person. That's my problem here.
Well, let's hope that this joint effort with the bank produces fruit. And another area you're working with the bank, you and President Vanga issued a joint statement on climate, working on climate. Perhaps you could say a word or two about where that leads.
On climate, the role of the fund is very straightforward. It is to identify stability risks, macroeconomic and financial stability risks caused by climate change, one, and two, to offer policy recommendations for countries to build more resilience to these risks and to adapt to a changing climate. And then, of course, we use the RST to give them some fiscal space for that action. Whereas the bank has a much more comprehensive role, they have sectoral knowledge. We combine our strengths. We, the fund, look at macro, including are conditions for private investment in a country good enough for private capital to invest on the climate agenda, including is domestic resource mobilization strong enough for the country to play its own role on the climate front, whereas the bank does much more comprehensive analysis of priorities, there's the sequencing of action. Together, Ajay may say that when he comes, Ajay's motto for us, or mantra for us, is 1 + 1 = 3. So together, we do 3.
Then let us hope. Final question. You've talked a lot about the risks of fragmentation in world markets. Is this getting worse, getting better, and what is the fund doing to counteract the problem?
Well, the reshaping of trade is happening. As I mentioned, we can see the trade flows changing. We can see that there are growing number of restrictions. We also know that when one country uses a measure, restrictive measure, 75% probability somebody would reciprocate. So we are a little bit on this down spiral. We also see industrial policy being more actively used. When there is a market failure, it makes sense. But when there is no market failure, it kind of adds to that friction. But what I also want to say is that when we look at the evidence, it shows that there are adjustments in the world economy that are preventing the worst outcome. And my colleague Pierre Olivier, when we were talking about that, he said, well, I don't know, should we be happy that the fragmentation policies are not quite working, or we still prefer to have less of them? I would say we still prefer to have less of them.
But let us.
Give me 1 second,
Of course.
20 seconds to say that we have to always remember that the reason the world turned against an integrated global economy is because it didn't work for everyone. There were winners and there were losers. And when there is no attention paid to those who lose, guess what? They push back. So for an integrated world economy, because we actually pull together in a fair and inclusive way. That's my call.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
And thank you for the hospitality of inviting us to your house.
Thank you very much. You are always, all of you, you're always welcome to host me in my house. Thank you.
Thank you.